Hey, it's Heidi Dawson, and this is Wednesday Wisdom, where I interview wildly successful people from across the world, where we get an inside view into what their daily life looks like. Success leaves clues, and on Wednesdays, we're finding them. Join me now for the latest wildly successful interview. Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 71 of the Wildly Successful Lifestyle Podcast. And it's Wednesday Wisdom. So, I have someone fabulous on today. The brain is super fascinating. And today I have as my guest the brain coach. That is her handle on Instagram. And if you don't follow her, I encourage you to do it now. Do it right now. She's so good. And she's a third-year doctoral student in clinical neuropsychology, which is even just hard for me to say, but she's ninth year of post-secondary education studying psychology, and she brings encouragement and self-help tools to over 300,000 people on Instagram, and she's just so interesting as well. So here I am. I'm going to introduce you to Nawal. Am I saying your name right?
Yes, you are. Thank
Perfect.
you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I definitely love the way you do your Instagram, and I love all of your about me, the video. They're really well done. How do you find time to do that being a student?
I think all my free time just goes into this labor of love, and I really enjoy it. That's why I can take out so much time for it, honestly.
Right, because you enjoy it. All right, so I have a couple questions that I love to ask everyone. And the first two will be ones that I'm curious about. And I think a lot of people are curious because we like to see what works for other people. So do you have, being busy as a student, do you have a regular morning routine that you do every morning?
I definitely try to keep a morning routine. So basically, usually I try to wake up at 7. I'm a very morning person. And the first thing I do is physical activity. It can be anything. So today I went for a run and it was great. And then I come back, have a cup of coffee, and do some journaling. And it could be like 5 to 10 minutes. So those are the two things that I try my best to do every morning. And then usually I would make my schedule for the day. So this would allow me to keep on track and, start my day in an organized way. And I really, really find that to be productive. So,
Okay.
and yeah, and then I try to just end everything by 8 p.m. I check out and then I just do whatever I want to do.
Okay, that's really good. 8 p.m. is a nice time. I generally like to be in bed by 9. So I like 8 hours of sleep, which I think is one of the questions that I'm going to ask next because a lot of people say 8 hours, and if I don't get 8 hours, I mean, I am sort of a mess. I like to have 7 to 8 hours for sure. So how many hours of sleep do you get then? And do you think that is ideal for optimal brain function to have a lot of sleep?
Yeah, I think there's a fine balance between sleep. Too much sleep is also not good, especially for our cognitive capacity and the way we process things. Go to a lecture and can you sit in a lecture for 3 hours? That's something that requires your brain to work. And if you don't get enough sleep or too much sleep, your brain is kind of imbalanced.
Okay.
So I think the good a sweet spot is between 6 to 8 hours of sleep, and I try to also aim for between those hours. It depends from person to person too.
I can see that. Yeah, it definitely would depend. And when I have gotten too much sleep, I do feel like it's almost as bad as getting not enough sleep. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I actually get a really bad headache if I sleep
I
too
do as
much or
well.
if I nap for too long. It's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, napping to me, I'm not a huge napper. My husband does like to sleep, take a nap in the afternoon, and sometimes I'll lay down, but I'm not a huge napper. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I'm not tired in the afternoon usually. So, okay, good. All right. So 6 to 8 hours and too much sleep is almost as bad as getting not enough sleep. I love that. I live by that. All right. So now you immigrated to Canada from Pakistan at 12, correct?
Mhm.
Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So
So was it difficult as a young girl immigrating to a new country?
definitely, it was really difficult. I didn't realize at that age what I was getting into or what was happening. But now that I reflect back on it, it's just, I realize how difficult it was, but how it was hard for me to just fit in into an environment that was literally 180. It was just the cultural aspect of things, the language, the people. It was completely different. And even now in adulthood, that part of me still exists. And sometimes I feel outed, but I think it's more of an internal thing than an external thing now.
Okay.
Because, we all kind of, we're all the same really, and we all
Isn't that true?
interact in the same way. Yeah. So when it comes down to it, it's more, you know, talking to people, feeling self-conscious when you can't pronounce specific words. Um, Kids are also savages, by the way. So
Oh,
at 12,
terrible.
middle
Terrible.
school and
Especially
grade
at that
school.
at 12, 13. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So, there was, I remember one of the things that happened initially. So back home, we would stand up and answer our teacher in class. And when I came here, I got up and started answering the question.
Yeah.
And this 12-year-old me is like, trying to answer a question, and everyone around me is just giggling. And I
They're
have
like,
no idea what's happening. So then my teacher had to like politely later on tell me like, okay, so you don't have to stand up if have to answer a question. It's totally okay if you keep sitting down and do it. And yeah, I really remember that vividly because it was like one of those, confusing moments because it's a clash in culture.
yeah, it's completely different. I mean, you're coming from a totally different culture. And did you have to learn the language, or did you already know English?
I did know English to an extent, but the way we learn English there is it's with an accent, and the
Okay.
accent is heavy enough that you have to improve it so you're not recognized that way. Like you adapt to the language that you speak here, right? So
Right.
that's what I did. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. So that's really yeah, because you don't have a strong accent. I mean, but you have almost no accent, which is
Yeah, I
interesting.
have
Did you have to study did you have to go to certain classes for that, or is it just
I didn't have no, I my sister's a year younger, so we really tried to talk in English with each other
okay?
all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that really helped us. And we are also social. So we tried to, interact with other kids and try to make friends and just talk in English the entire time. And now it's actually weird for us to talk in our own language with each
Right.
other.
It's immersion. It's
Yeah.
immersion. Like I love my husband's family is German, and so I took German in college, and going and taking classes to me was not anywhere near as good as when we go over there. And I mean, most of his family doesn't speak English at all. So you basically either speak German or you are not speaking at all, So you learn fairly quickly when you're immersed in it. So I mean, I think the best way to learn a new language is to just throw yourself in there,
Yeah,
exactly the way you did it,
absolutely.
which is perfect.
Absolutely.
All right. So now, how did you decide that you wanted to study psychology and human behavior? I mean, I think that is one of the most fascinating topics to me.
Same here. It's something that was completely new to me growing up because it's not really considered um, a field that's highly recognized, especially, in Pakistan and even here, a lot of people don't think it's an actual science when it is. Just because we can't see the disorder doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
So that's what fascinated me and human behavior in general, how a lot of us behave in a similar way and think in a similar way when we're feeling certain feelings really, really impressed me. And I used to read books on it in high school. And then I got into neuroscience for my bachelor's. So I did a bachelor's in neuroscience, and that was like a biopsych double major. And that's where I decided, okay, I want to go to the psych part because it's just so fascinating. And I see people in my life that have been impacted by mental health issues, and I don't know how to help because the knowledge is lacking in so many families. So that's what really like propelled
That
me to
is
go
so,
for.
so true. It's for sure
Yeah.
because, we don't focus, we didn't used to focus much on mental health. Like the only time we would address mental health was when somebody was really, really bad off.
Hmm.
So now I think that we're being more proactive on it. And just like your Instagram is so helpful, it makes people look at their own life and go, okay, how am I handling my anxiety? Or how am I being you have so many different topics that you talk about, and it really does make it easy for like the layman that we're, like me, I'm having trouble pronouncing neuropsychology. For those of us that aren't brain scientists or doctors, it makes it so clear and easy, and I love that. And that was one of the things that really drew me to want to interview you for the podcast, because I knew that we would be able to come up with some really good stuff for the episode, with so many people really wanting to improve not only their physical health but also now their mental health. It's become a really big thing. So now your Instagram is filled with, I mean, the formulas that you have are so uplifting, and it's really inspiring and helpful. And one thing that you do talk about is our self-talk. I've read enough to know that like we have so many thousands and thousands of thoughts in our heads, and like 80% of them are negative. So I mean, and we're not even aware of it. Sometimes we don't even know that it's happening. How do you manage your own self-talk, and do you have any advice for people on how to manage that?
Yeah, so self-talk is huge because basically that's like the one most significant way we can alter our feelings and thoughts by thinking a certain way, right? So when we feel a certain way, it's because we're thinking these negative thoughts. And it's usually that inner critic that's just really loud in our heads. And they might be distorted thoughts. That's what we don't recognize. Thoughts are not always true. And that's something that I learned probably close to my master's when I was doing it because, demands became higher. I was more critical of my own abilities. The imposter syndrome came in. I didn't feel like I belonged in the program. So these things made my confidence deplete. And then I realized that these thoughts were just distorted. It was, all or nothing thinking. I mess up once and I just think everything is wrong or everything is just going upside down for me.
Right.
And to recognize that is where resiliency comes in. So if we are able to catch ourselves when we're thinking in this negative thinking loop and just, being our worst critic when we should be uplifting ourselves because no one
Right.
else is going to do it for us, well, there can be support systems, but we shouldn't be relying on outer external support systems to validate ourselves and to make us feel more resilient and better.
That's
So it's so
that's
important.
Yeah, that it's such a good thing for you to say that. It's, you have to do it for yourself. I interviewed a guy that he said no one's coming to save you. It's we sometimes, even I think especially as women, we tend to think, oh, we're gonna have our white knight, or someone's gonna come and just swoop us up, and that isn't the case. And if you, the sooner you know that, and you just say, okay, I am responsible for my life, and my thoughts really do create my life.
Hmm.
And just what you said is your thoughts are, I mean, they're creating everything about you. They're creating your emotions. So the sooner we get that loop to be under control. I practice little different things at night. Sometimes I'll, if I wake up in the middle of the night, so why is it so bad at night? Like, why do we just beat ourselves up in the middle of the night? You're like thinking about all the horrible things. But anyway, I I think about things that I love about either myself or my home or my career, anything. I just start thinking about all the things that I love about my life, and it puts me back to sleep.
Yeah, gratitude, right? That's so
Gratitude.
important.
That's
Gratitude and
exactly right.
self-compassion. Hmm.
So then, how much of our brain function, and this is a question I've had, and I'm so glad I get to ask you, how much of our brain function is hereditary, and how much can we actually affect?
So this is a complicated question because there's no quantifiable number for this, but
Okay.
research has shown that there's 30% of the brain, um, the genes in our brain are active, so they have been expressed. So what is what complicates things is our experiences in our lives can activate another gene that could lead to a certain mental health disorder or a certain it could be a trigger almost. So
Okay.
when when we for example are going through a really really tough time, genetically how our genes work, basically either we can get out of it or we could go more into a spiral of a mental illness. And the same thing is with physical illness. Sometimes in an environment, it plays a role in expressing that gene. So you might have this gene, but it doesn't get expressed until you experience something and then you get that disorder or physical illness. So I think it's just more dependent on your environmental factors as well. But yeah, I'd say 30%.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. That I think the same thing about cancer, right? They say that most people are walking around with the cells that cause cancer or turn into cancer, whatever. But a lot of times if you can be proactive, maybe because I know sugar feeds it. So the same thing with your brain then is, maybe are there things we could do to be proactive? Like, does meditation help? I mean, probably focusing on good thoughts will help you to not be able to go spiral down the bad thought loop. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's more about, so for example, if you have someone in your family that has anxiety and anxiety related disorder, especially your parent or your sibling, you are more likely to get that disorder because, first, the way you're raised and the coping mechanisms that you have learned might not be working, right? So it's all about the learning part of things too. But when the genes come in, you're also more likely to get that disorder. And by practicing things, strategies that can reverse it, so the way you're feeling about things can really really help. And there's so many things that you can do. It's just because there's so many, sometimes people get really overwhelmed and don't know what really works for them. And I do want to remind everyone that not everything is going to work out for you. Some things might, and some things will not.
Right. Okay, that's fair. I mean, and that's actually really valid, good advice for people, because, sometimes we're like, oh, well, if it doesn't work out, we go back to what you were saying, black and white, everything, it's all or nothing. We
Mhm.
think, oh, everything's so bad because I didn't get this or I didn't accomplish this. And it's okay. You're going to be okay whether you accomplish that. Maybe it's leading you to something else. So I think that's really really good advice. Now, okay, so let's talk a little bit about social media. I talked about your Instagram and how much I love it. So social media is really it's a new norm, I think. I mean, that's just the way I think we communicate. Do you think this is going to have a long-term effect on society? I mean, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's both. So I'm in a space in social media that's very positive, right? So we can pick and choose how we tailor social media to our own needs. But for youth, I think there needs to be some barriers that need to be built because it can turn really negative, and people are comparing themselves with other people's highlight reel, for example,
Right.
which can cause a lot of um, it can deplete self-confidence, but also cause a lot of just distress in general. And also the information that we're being fed is not entirely accurate all the time, and people don't know how to fact check this information, especially even news outlets, and just anyone can put out anything. And if
Right.
especially in the form of a video, we just see it and we sometimes just believe it until we realize, oh my God, that was a fake edited video, or someone just put out this information for no
Oh, I
reason.
know that is a really good point. I hadn't thought about that when I was asking this question, but That's really true. I mean, you have to be able to differentiate between using your own common sense of what is real and what is not real. And that's tough because
Mhm.
I can't tell by looking at a video if it's been doctored or not, you know? So, but, and I also like that you said you can pick and choose. So I do think that we tend to compare a lot. And I always say, look, if there's somebody's Instagram that's just really making you sad because you're like, oh, I can't have that, or I'm like, just mute it for a second. You know, give yourself a break. Yeah, we should be able to handle it, but if you can't and you're not in that place right now, then mute it and just, you know, just go on with your life, because saying to avoid social media altogether is a little bit unrealistic, I think. And I did delete TikTok because it took me about, I mean, I would get on there. It's so interesting to me that I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I can't spend 2 hours on TikTok. It just isn't reasonable. So I eventually deleted that and I don't miss it, you know. So I'm sure people are like, oh, you should be on TikTok. But Instagram, you know, is great for me, and Facebook. But I also I don't spend a lot of time on there. Are there certain ones you love?
I definitely love Instagram the most because I think we have more control over what we follow and what we don't, right? Because if
Yes.
we stay in our home feed, we're following and we're looking at the accounts that we follow.
Right.
And you brought up a really good point where you said that sometimes, like, if you were feeling sad about something, just cut it off. But one thing is that a lot of people don't know how some content is affecting them.
It's
So
subconscious.
it's subconscious, yeah, and it's just so
Oh,
hard sometimes
okay.
to even try
Yeah.
to realize, okay, is this, because sometimes we're
Why
just
do I
our
feel
ego comes
bad?
in.
Yeah, they're asking themselves, why do I feel bad right now? I shouldn't feel bad. It's
And
subconscious. Ah, okay.
so I think a good recommendation or suggestion here would be really just start from the first account you follow and go down. And is this account bringing value to me? If it's not, just don't follow it. It's just not worth it.
I like that.
Yeah,
That's a great advice because you know, that's pretty easy to do. I've done that.
yeah,
I've done
same.
that before where, yeah, I'm sure you have too, because we have to protect. I'm old enough to know I got to protect my brain, you know, and sometimes whether it's feed that has turned, you know, I don't know, started talking about things, I'm just like, whoa, I don't want to hear about that anymore. So I just mute it, you know. I'm trying to like not hurt people's feelings by not unfollowing them. So I'll just not look at their feed.
Yeah,
So
no, that's a
that's
good
great
one.
advice, and I think people could really gain value from that. Okay, so now you believe that, and I agree wholeheartedly with this statement, that mental health is as important as physical health. So we have basics with physical health that we all kind of know, you know, eat healthy, exercise a certain amount, all that good stuff. Is there other things that for our mental health that we could do, like basics for optimal mental health?
So we kind of touched on this a few minutes ago, and I am going to come back to the same thing, that different things work for different people. But some of the main things that really help are challenging those negative thoughts. So if we realize, okay, I'm being mean to myself, I'm not thinking realistically in a sense. Uh, how can I make this thought more realistic? How can I practice self compassion right now? So, really just being aware of our thoughts and challenging those negative ones to realize, is this thought true? Or what evidence do I have that this thought is true? And what evidence do I have that this thought is not true? Just asking these two questions when we are in distress, or when we think, somebody doesn't like us or we're not good enough in something, that could really help. Another thing is meditation,
Yeah.
journaling, um, and physical exercise also really, really helps with mental health. And I would encourage everyone to just move their body, even if it's just for 10 to 20 minutes a day. Just do something like yoga, something that just allows you to get that heart rate up and just, get that breathing flowing.
Yeah, that's really good. So I think basically, Meditation and journaling for me have been extremely helpful. And I'll tell you, along the same point that you said, challenging negative thoughts and, being aware of your thoughts. So when I journal, sometimes I'll say that I'm feeling this today, or I woke up feeling this today. And then maybe why would I be feeling that? And so just kind of get it out on paper. And sometimes you look at it and you're like, boy, that's really silly, so that's really good advice, to meditate, to journal, and to move your body as basic, optimal mental health. And when you journal, maybe you can challenge those negative thoughts, which I think is really great, because we all have them, and I wish we didn't, but I think that's something that's universsul.
Yeah, that's part of being human. That's something we all have. So
right.
It's completely normal.
Makes everyone feel better, and not that, I guess, the old saying, misery loves company. And I don't ever like even hearing that, but we all have certain aspects to like you said, it's being human, and it's okay. It's okay to have those thoughts, but be aware that you're having them, because just like you said with social media, it can be a subconscious thing that's affecting us and you don't realize it. So be aware, go through and be proactive and delete the accounts or mute the accounts that are making you feel bad about yourself, or making you feel whatever, so. All right, now, who are some of your mentors, or you have some people that have really inspired you?
Definitely. I get inspired by some figures that are very personal in my life. So for example, my research advisor, my dad, my mom, they're very hardworking parents. And, I've seen them immigrate to a brand new country and start from zero, leave their jobs, they were both professors back home. So they were starting from nothing here with 3 teenage kids. And
wow.
That just so inspires me. I know.
And we're so glad. I love to see that. It's so, anytime that we have that here in America too. And I'm always like, that's the American dream, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Is that the Canadian, do they say that that's the kind of the Canadian dream, or?
I think I've heard that on Dragon's Den or something, but okay. I've never heard this in real life. I think American dream is a more popular saying. Yeah. But it is basically, the Canadian dream. You're coming into this new world for new opportunities, for better education. And that's the exact reason my parents immigrated with 3 kids. So it's really, really inspiring to see where they are now after such, hard work and struggle. And they remind me that anything you want to achieve in life requires hard work and, putting yourself past your comfort zone, which they exactly did.
That's wonderful advice coming from your parents. Good for them. but it's also paying off in, the value that you're adding to everyone as well. So I thank you for that. One last question I always have to ask my the people that I interview from Canada, I just love them so much. But you're is there anywhere in Canada that we must visit? Because it's so beautiful from the pictures. I've not been to Canada. My husband's been several times. Is there somewhere that you're like, oh my gosh, if you come here, you have to go here?
Lake Louise.
Lake Louise. Okay.
Yes. It's actually, so I lived in Vancouver for 7 years or so. We immigrated there.
Okay.
Such a beautiful place. But if you go to Lake Louise area, which is probably, it's in Alberta, so it's in the next province, but it's so beautiful. It feels like a dream. So if you ever come to Canada, you have to visit Lake Louise.
Okay. All right. Lake Louise it is. All right. That sounds amazing. Well, this has been so much fun. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends, because we're just going to keep going bigger and better places together. And I love that about us. Talk to you in a few days.